Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
I'm with President Mohamed Nasheed, the former president of the Maldives and now the Speaker of the Parliament, the Majlis. President Nasheed is in Delhi and welcome to The Print.
Well, thank you very much, and it's nice to be back in Delhi.
You're coming after a long time. I remember one time when you came and you wanted to buy books in Khan Market, but this is when you were in exile.
Well, yes, I have been in exile for 2-3 years, but we were able to come back because we won the elections. And after the presidential elections, which I was not allowed to contest, right. So our party fielded Ibrahim Saleh, yes. The present president. We won it very handsomely. And then after that, we went to elections. We had that in May, which again we won a sweeping landslide 2/3 majority of the parliament.
So that's great. So the Maldivian Democratic Party, the MDP, is in a majority in the parliament, and of course you have your man as president.
Yes.
So now you're a free man after many years in exile and earlier in solitary confinement under the president, the former president.
This circle goes on. It goes on. I am free for a while, and then again I am unfortunately incarcerated again. Then I am let out again and able to.
No, but now you're a free man. Your party is in power.
Exactly.
So you control the levers of power too.
Well, I am the Speaker of the Parliament and also the leader of the party.
So you've been talking during the election campaign and also when you were in exile in Colombo, President Nasheed, you talked a lot about what your party would do when you came to power and if you came to power, and now you're in power. And one of the things I remember was that you were very upset about the increasing expansion of Chinese influence in the Indian Ocean, both in the Maldives as well as in Sri Lanka. What are your thoughts on that?
Exactly the same. It hasn't changed. It can't change. Our biggest concern, worry, is actually attempts by other countries to change state type the Maldives.
What does that mean?
We want our democracy consolidated. We want rule of law. We want freedom of expression. We want our people to be free. All our lives we've been working for that. And if China decides to export an ideology in the guise of communism or whatever, totalitarian rule, that is against our aspirations.
But do you think they're doing that?
Well, while President Yamin was there, they backed President Yamin as much as they can. I am aware that they also supported the President Yamin, yes, in changing a number of legislations, removing oversight on projects, right, removing transparency on tendering processes. Also, for instance, the change to the constitution which allowed us to sell land to other countries. So there were a number of things that President Yamin did that was to their liking, that also plugged into their interest.
So also you had a free trade agreement
was totally unnecessary, very one-sided. We don't trade that much with China. Our trade balance is completely in their favor. We don't export anything to China.
Anything at all? I'm sure you...
Well, we export some fish, but we have a lot of tourists coming. We have 250. China is the second largest tourist market for us. But in trade agreements, it's on visible trade.
So you have fish and you have Chinese tourists.
We sell some amount of fish to China, but China is not our biggest buyer. And a lot of Chinese come to the Maldives. That is a big 250,000 a year. Last year, 250,000, and that's a big contribution to our economy. Right. There's no doubt about that.
Okay, but are you planning to overturn any of these agreements, like the free trade agreement, for example, or any of the other laws, the land law?
The free trade agreement is actually dead because it has to be ratified through the parliament, and I can't see any appetite in the parliament to ratify that. So the free trade, there is no free trade agreement to talk about. Okay. The other projects. Now, for instance, I'll give you an example of how this is working. We have built 7,000 housing units at a cost. The Chinese had built it at a cost of 1,900 rupiah a square meter.
Right. That's the
square feet.
Okay.
Square feet. Now, the most expensive, most lavish and high level flats, housing units in the Maldives is at 1,000 or 1,200 rupiah. And these are social houses. So this is at 1,900.
So what's the, it sounds to me like a land grab almost.
Well, so what they do is they create debt. And the asset that the debt creates does not map and the asset will not be able to produce a return enough to pay the debt.
Sure.
Because the debt and the price of the asset was inflated specifically to see that the business plan fails. So my view is that China has intentionally funded projects where the business plan will fail. They make sure that the business plan fails. So when the business plan fails, they would be asking for equity.
Okay.
And with equity, you relinquish land and therefore sovereignty. So,
so that's happening already?
Well, the expensive projects have happened.
Yes.
The money has to be given.
Yes.
And when we start paying the project, we can't pay it from the money we get from the blocks of flats.
Sure, of course, that's not enough.
So that's not enough, and the government would have to.
So how much do you owe the Chinese?
We owe. That's again another mystery because there's been so many sovereign guarantees dished out by President Yamin to all sorts of people. The finances to bring all these things together.
So he's still collating figures and he's adding them up.
So one of the figures that coming up to is $3.7 billion to Chinese Exim Bank.
Half your GDP.
Yes, our GDP is 5 billion.
So it's more than half
our
GDP.
Yes.
So you may as well sell half your country to the Chinese.
Well, I think the Chinese government must understand what has happened here, not only in the Maldives. When you give development assistance, and if this assistance actually becomes a trap,
right,
you will be losing goodwill. The whole essence, one of the main reasons, I suppose, for development assistance is to assist, to live together.
But do other countries in the Indian Ocean region, for example, does India understand what's happening in the Maldives?
I don't know. I don't think people have come to realize the exact science of how this is worked out. You get an unsolicited project, the price to the extent that the business plan will fail, get a Chinese state-owned company to complete the project, send a bill at the inflated price, and make sure that you are unable to pay it.
No, but I'm sure you've discussed this with the Indians,
yeah.
With Prime Minister Modi. I'm sure he knows
yes.
that this is what's happening.
Yeah, yeah.
So what do they say? What does the Prime Minister say?
Well, we have a very good Indian assistance.
$1 billion.
$1 billion. You know, whatever we have to pay to the Chinese government or any government, it's not. We don't have to pay it in one go.
Sure.
The total bill is 3.7 billion. So if we can get our act together in the next year or two, we can be in a position to pay the installments. But that would be so unfair. This money did not come. It's not there.
Life is unfair, President.
No, but,
President. I mean, you were in solitary confinement, you were in jail. That was not fair either.
We are not buying this. No, we are not buying this. This is not trade. This is not development.
Are you saying to me you're not going to pay that money?
Then if I say that, that would have implications on our financial systems.
Exactly. So what, what are you saying?
But I want to ask other small countries in the same situation, what are they going to do about it?
They don't have an option. These are the rules of the game.
This is a human rights issue. This is suppression. This is occupation. This is colonialism. So we can't.
You're accusing the Chinese of colonialism because they tried to help your country.
We can't frame this. We can't frame it as development assistance. We can't frame it as anything else other than a debt trap. Now,
you know what this reminds me of? You called it imperialism and colonialism.
Yeah.
There is only one phrase in the books that we in India know very well.
Yes.
And that phrase is called the East India Company.
Yes. Now, China has grabbed more land than the East India Company without firing a single shot. Now, you collect it together. See how much land are we talking about everywhere? Apparently, it's 27 Sri Lankas. Now, the East India Company had just Calcutta and a little bit of it around there.
No, they had most of the country.
Well, then let's not underplay East India Company. But if I was in Calcutta when the company was there, and if I had gone to an arbitration court with East India Company on the one side, that would have been silly. Now,
what are you saying, President? You're saying that the Chinese own the equivalent of 27 Maldives in the Indian Ocean?
27 Sri Lankas, not in the Indian Ocean. Not in the Indian Ocean. A pattern of this has happened. Cambodia, in fact Australia, large threats in many places.
Are you taking on the Chinese?
I'm not taking on anything. What I'm simply saying is, look, this has happened to the Maldives. We have a very big debt, but we do not have the assets. The money, the debt didn't create the assets.
27 Sri Lankas would imply that the Sri Lankans also have a problem with the Chinese in their country.
Well, it's up to the Sri Lankan government and its people to realize issues that they have.
That's right.
But
you know them well.
I know them very well, and the situation that they are in also.
Yes.
But you know, we come to arrangements where, in the process of the arrangement, we go more deeply into these difficult situations. So it's important that we don't try to find an arrangement, but we find a concession that the Chinese government is able to recognize what has happened, and then actually come down to the actual price of the debt.
So you want the Chinese to give you a concession on how much?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. And
how much do you think they should give? What kind of discounts are you looking at?
No, what we're looking at is let's measure the concrete. Whatever was given is there in the country. So let's measure it up. How many rods of iron? How many tons of sand?
You're willing to do that kind of detail?
I think we have to do this detail. How else are we going to pay it back? It's not there.
Okay, so listen, so here's another question that I have, is that before the elections, before the MDP came back to power, your government came back to power, there was a lot of talk about how the Indian Navy and the Indian Air Force must withdraw its choppers that were stationed in the Maldives, in Addu, to help out Maldivians in emergency relief. What's happening on that?
Well, I believe they've extended their contracts, and you know, the Indian helicopter in Gan. They've been flying so many humanitarian. What they actually do, the helicopter does, is always fly people in distress. And I think we need the helicopter. That's why the government has extended the contract. It's doing a lot of good service, especially during bad weather as well. We are an island nation, and this thing is very helpful.
So what was the Indian Army Chief, Bipin Rawat? He was in the Maldives some days ago.
It's a nice place to visit.
It is.
I mean, it is a nice place to visit. Why shouldn't the chief visit the Maldives? It's a nice place. I think he should go with his wife and children also.
I think his wife was there. But to come back to the question on his visit, there was talk about security cooperation.
Yes.
What was that about?
Well, terrorism, to start with. The Maldives was very unfortunate, where the jihadi ideology flourished, especially in the last 10 years, and they have been able to recruit a number of our young people to go and fight in Syria. And now that the ISIS has lost it in Syria, they are all coming back. And how to deal with that situation, I think we need a lot of cooperation with everyone.
Your population is 400,000
Yeah.
people. It's perhaps smaller than Lajpat Nagar, which is a residential colony in
Yes,
Delhi.
Yes, yes, exactly.
So
and
are you saying that you still have the Al-Qaeda?
From there, I'm saying about 200 people went
To Syria?
To Syria.
200 people.
200
That's
people.
more people from the Maldives than from India.
Per capita, yes. Per capita, we probably had the highest amount of people
And
going
why
in
is
fact.
that? You're such a
Well,
small country.
yes.
You're an island nation.
Yeah. There was, for the last 20, 30 years, a very radical version of Islam has been propagated throughout. It's not just the Maldives, throughout the world. And so that created a breeding ground for jihadi movements, and recruitment became easy.
Okay. Let me come back to the Indian Ocean story, because that fascinates me. And India, which is at the center of the Indian Ocean. How do you look at India's role here in these parts?
A provider of security, to start with, again. The Maldives and Sri Lanka, Seychelles, Mauritius and Comoros and everyone, we sit in the navigable parts of the Indian Ocean. We are, Maldives alone covers 1,000 miles from north to south, 1,000 kilometers, 600 kilometers from east to west. So we are a big ocean state, and no one can cross the Indian Ocean without crossing the Maldives. So if there is a big competition for raw materials and markets, and these people start running around in the Indian Ocean, then of course it's worrying for us. Now, when our former president arrested the Chief Justice and prorogued and shut down the parliament and declared martial law or emergency rule, we were worried, and we asked Indian government, we were wanting assistance from India. And while all that was, President Yamin was doing all that, and when that was receptive to China, and that was a manner in which that they would like the president to operate, then India found it difficult, for instance, to give clarity, give a clear message to the government that you're doing it wrong, you can't do that, and stop doing all that. So the net provider of security issue comes also to see that our internal democracy is maintained, rule of law is maintained.
And you look at India for that?
We very much look at India for that. We very much want India to assist us in building capacity in our institutions, and also to see that others don't come to the Indian Ocean and then try to change our governance and the way we live.
Like who others?
China, for instance.
So you want India to see that countries like China don't come to the Indian Ocean and change the way you live?
No, we don't want to change the way we live. Our life, our way of life, we like it.
But do you want countries like India to help you do that?
Yes, we do. We do. We want the international community to make sure that everyone has their own livelihood and their own culture and self-determination. And we want India to assist us in doing that.
You have the Diego Garcia, which is not very far from you, where the Americans and the British have bases. Are you comfortable with that?
We have not actually seen the Americans trying to, they don't give development projects at all. So there's no American money coming to the Maldives at all. Whatever development assistance that comes from the United States, that comes from the IMF and the World Bank.
Right.
These are very transparent institutions, and my advice to any country would be, please do not touch the IMF. It's worse. You will lose your government. So if you take Chinese loans, you end up in a debt trap. If you go to the IMF and get an IMF program, your government will fall.
But your brother Islamic country, Pakistan, is doing both.
Well, again, we don't want to, I don't necessarily want to discuss the situation that Pakistan is in. But we like to have a democratic society. We want to have rule of law. We want to prosper. We want a good life.
Last questions, President Nasheed. SARC has been dead for some time, dead in the water, can I say. What are your expectations as a Maldivian?
You know, even if SARC is dead or alive or whatever, we need connectivity. We need to connect the region in transport, in activity, in trade, in culture. We need to connect the region. And we need to trade. We need to loosen up our borders. We need more investments on all sides. And I think, therefore, even if SARC is dead, we need it.
But is that happening, this connectivity and this...
Bilaterally it is happening, yes. Cochin ferry linking Cochin, Maldives and Sri Lanka, the one that was agreed upon in the last SARC summit that we had in the Maldives, is now going to come into operation, I am told, by both the governments.
That sounds fantastic. And last question on coming back to Delhi, how does it feel to be here?
Oh, it's lovely to be here, and I'm very fortunate that I brought the good weather to you. Now, Delhi is always nice, and I like coming back here. It's beautiful, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much for speaking to The Print. This is Jyoti Malhotra. Please continue to watch the channel. It's live and buzzing.